Hello again. Last time I talked about the heart and the electromagnetic field that is produced by the heart and how it affects the body and the psyche. And through many experiments, it has been found out that certain feelings and emotions tend to cause more coherence, that they like to put it, within that electromagnetic field, and which affects our body and psyche positively. If you haven't watched the previous videos, I talk about how it actually all starts with thoughts, and then our thoughts and beliefs is what affect our feelings, and feelings that cause us to act in a certain way or behave externally in a certain way. And basically people in general really want to have as they call it, good vibes. They want to feel good. They want to be happy or content or satisfied. And they tend to do things externally and even internally to cause themselves to be happy, to be content. And it all starts with thought. So some of the feelings that have been talked about that affect this electromagnetic field are gratitude, forgiveness, acceptance, abundance, or the idea of feeling there's abundance in the world, and unconditional love. You may have heard about these concepts and ideas before, but no one really, they kind of tell you about them, but how can you possibly feel these things? Which is what is important, that's the point. And I think that through thought and through belief, not belief in a sense that of the concept of belief, having a certain belief, we can generate these feelings. For example, a car accident, and they got out of the car, okay, they can be horrified and say, oh my God, they can either be horrified and say to themselves, they haven't died, what happened, and they kind of freak out and even develop a phobia out of it. And someone sees the accident as a blessing, they came out alive. That means maybe they were given another chance, or they might find more meaning in their life. Both of these people, even though they were in the same car accident, because of how they looked at the situation, a certain feeling was generated. One of fear and another one of gratitude and a feeling that they were being blessed. So here's the way we look at things obviously affects how we feel. This goes towards any kind of these feelings or concepts I talked about before. Even accepting what is given to you. And I don't mean acceptance as in you don't really see the negative in it and just, oh, everything is rosy colored and I love everything, something like that. No, I mean acceptance of what is coming your way, what is present in your life. That, okay, there's something I don't like, but I accept it exists and let me see what I can do about it. That's a very different idea, very different belief or thought pattern than someone who says, I reject this idea, I don't like my life, I want things to change now, and they become really upset after that. And there's also the concept of forgiveness. And people usually struggle very much with this concept because they kind of think that when you forgive someone, it's for the other person's sake. Really, foremost, it's always for your sake. You're the one who's been living maybe in hatred and anger or hurt and upsetness. If you forgive the other person, that person really did something bad to me and I don't like them, but I come to the realization I need to get past that. I don't need to live my whole life remembering this particular incident, because this will affect me for the rest of my life, and this is good for me. And if it affects the other person positively, that's another issue, if you wanted to do that. But really, forgiveness is for the person who has been hurt or harmed in some way to begin with. There are also empathy and compassion. Empathy is when you try to put yourself in someone else's shoes. And it's not always the most easiest thing to do, because as we talked about, we tend to look at the world from our own perspective and how we see the world. And in order to be able to understand someone else on that emotional level, we need to even connect to our own emotions first in order to understand partly how the other person is feeling. Because basically all humans have the same emotional states. Just what triggers them and how much we feel them for how long differs between people. For example, if someone is feeling sad, in order to empathize with them, we try to understand what they are going through. And then we try to connect to how we actually feel when we're actually sad, but not really go through the sadness itself, rather just know that yes, we have felt sadness before and we know what it's like. And we don't have to really just go into the sadness itself. That becomes sympathy and may lead you down to a more negative road. No, I mean just the idea of knowing what sadness is, because you have felt it before. No one has never felt it before. Or happiness, you have felt it before. Or joy, or contentment, or anger. And compassion and kindness is when you really go past the person's mistakes or how they are. You simply want what's the best for them. You want, regardless of anything they have done or said or felt, simply want them to be their best. Another concept that people struggle with is the idea of abundance. And the idea of abundance is that there's always more of what is present. People struggle with that, especially with materialistic things and money, to be specific, because they think I have a specific amount of money. If I do not, I don't need to use it in a certain way. If I use it in a certain way, then I will lose this money and I'm not able to get any more. And this is stemming from a thought of lack, that there's a lack of something more, that this is all I ever had. And if you think that, obviously you're not going to get any more. It's like having something and you're afraid that you're going to lose it all the time. What kind of a life would you live then? And I'm afraid to lose my money. I'm afraid to lose my house. I'm afraid there's always this, that there's nothing ever more. As if something ends, there's no more love, there's no more money, there's no more houses, there's nothing anymore. And it's really, really stressful kind of thinking. This person is always can become obsessed with the idea of keeping money, and they can be obsessed with keeping things they don't really need, because they keep on thinking, well, what if I used it someday? What if I could never find something like that anymore? And the idea of abundance is that there's always more money. And money is not really, people may argue, well, money only comes in a certain way, or money only, really that's just your own thinking. There's so many options for money to come from. And yes, you have to do certain things for money to come, for example, work, but that does not mean that it ends there. There's no more. You kind of even not give yourself a treat because you're afraid the money will be gone. It's like you're always living in a sense of, I'm not going to have anything anymore. And that's not really a very satisfying kind of life, or contentment doesn't exist much in such type of thing. Last thing I want to talk about is unconditional love. And to understand unconditional love is maybe more easier to compare it to conditional love, and in the sense that people might think that one is better than the other. It's just both of them exist and will always really exist, but one is more, really helps a person become more content or more satisfied, and one really has conditions on it, hence the name. And love is when you have love that is connected to a what-if situation. or a situation that involves an if, really. Like, if you love me, I will love you back. If you do what you're supposed to do, then I will love you back. If I do something, then I will accept who I am. For example, if I do good on my exams, then I will feel good about myself. If you didn't do good on your exams, then you will feel good about yourself. And that affects your whole being, like self-worth and self-esteem. Sometimes you're not going to do good on an exam because of many factors. And just putting that condition on yourself may affect you in many ways. And you might be like trying to prove yourself constantly that over only a grade that, if you think in the bigger picture, may not really affect you much in life. But that condition you put on yourself is very limiting. And this is called conditioned love, which you see a lot, by the way, and it's a love that stems from the ego. Then you have unconditional love, which I think comes rather from the whole big picture idea, which is more right-brained in nature than left-brained. And here you don't have the if condition. I do something for its own sake, not because to get something in return. I may, of course, really, you will get something in return. That's how really life is. You give something and you take something back, but really you don't really do it to get something in return. I love you for who you are, not because I want you to love me back. You may love me back, and that's great, but I love you for who you are just for its sake. I understand you for who you are. I accept you for who you are. Doesn't mean you're not going to change. Doesn't mean that, there's nothing wrong with the world or anything like that. But no, rather, it's just the idea that there's no conditions. See, you broke that limitation about the conditions you have towards someone else or yourself or an object. If I don't get that, then I'll be unhappy for the rest of my life. See, that's a conditioned love. But if I get it, I want it for sure. But if I get it or don't get it, it doesn't matter. I'm glad that I just want it. And that is a very open-ended kind of love. And really, it is achieved through, as I said, through the type of thinking, a certain thinking pattern. And it doesn't come suddenly, even though in the previous video I talked about peak experiences. People who feel peak experiences actually feel these feelings: gratitude, acceptance, unconditional love, and abundance in intense ways within that peak experience. And it kind of it's like a natural high, if you want. Describe the situation, you need to actually experience it to know what I'm talking about, because really you can't really put it in words. So this is briefly about the certain positive feelings that may cause you to feel more content and satisfied and really regulate your whole system and your psyche and your physical system even. I hope this shed more light about how things link together and give you a more bigger picture about the body and the psyche.